Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're an IGCSE student right now, I know exactly what's keeping you up at night. And honestly, it's probably not the sheer volume of formulas or historical dates or crazy biological definitions you have to memorize. Now, the real nightmare is the ticking clock. It's that terrifying pit-of-your-stomach feeling halfway through a high-stakes paper when you look up at the wall, look down at your desk, and realize you still have 40 marks to go, but only 20 minutes left on the timer. The cold sweat kicks in, and suddenly all those months of studying feel completely useless. But hey, take a deep breath, because today we're going to completely dismantle that fear. In this explainer, we're walking through a foolproof, step-by-step timeline for mastering your exam time management. We're going to make this massive, overwhelming beast of a topic incredibly easy to digest so you can start applying it right away.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the exam time trap, the golden timing ratio, the first 5 minutes, the two-pass method, subject-specific pacing rules, and finally, what to do when time runs out.
Let's dive into part 1, the exam time trap, and why fully prepared students still fail.
I want to start by asking you a pretty provocative question. Why do fully prepared students fail? Think about it. We all know these students, right? They're the ones staying up until 2 a.m. studying for months. They've done like a decade's worth of past papers. Their highlighter game is perfectly color-coded, and they can literally recite the textbook backward. Yet they still walk out of the exam hall, look at you in sheer panic, and end up getting a grade way below what they're actually capable of. So why does that happen?
Well, the harsh reality is this. Many students walk into the exam hall fully prepared, yet walk out totally disappointed because they rushed important sections or left questions completely blank. You see, the Cambridge IGCSE system isn't just testing your memory. It's specifically built to test your speed, your decision-making, and your ability to execute a plan under intense pressure. Failing or underperforming is so often a symptom of poor pacing, not a lack of knowledge. Think about it. If you spend 20 whole minutes staring at a 3-mark question just out of sheer stubbornness, you've effectively destroyed your chances of finishing that 15-mark essay at the end of the paper. You didn't fail because you didn't know the essay topic. You failed because you mismanaged your time.
Moving right along to part 2, the golden timing ratio. This is the baseline rule of your IGCSEs.
Then number 1. Seriously, before you even set foot inside an exam hall, this is the absolute golden rule you must have hardwired into your brain. 1 mark equals 1 minute of your time. Think of it like a really strict shopping budget. If you walk into a store with $60 in your wallet, you're not going to spend $5 on an item that is clearly only worth $1, right? Time in that exam hall is your currency. 1 mark buys you 1 minute of effort. This is going to be your most reliable baseline time management strategy across almost all of your subjects.
So how does this actually play out mathematically? Well, if you're sitting down for a 60-mark paper, it should take you roughly 60 minutes of active writing. A 5-mark question, that gets 5 minutes maximum. If you catch yourself spending 15 minutes on a tiny 4-mark question, you are mathematically tanking your overall score because you're literally stealing time away from those high-value questions later on. And please notice that crucial third point. Always build in a 10 to 15% time buffer. So you have a 90-minute paper. You should plan to finish answering everything in about 75 to 80 minutes. Why? Because you must never plan to be writing right up to the final bell. That buffer is your safety net. It's for when your pen unexpectedly runs out of ink, or when your mind just goes totally blank on a basic definition, or when you need to double-check a really messy math calculation.
All right, part 3, the first 5 minutes. It's time to shift from panic to pure strategy.
Let's step chronologically into the exam room itself. Picture this. The invigilator says, "You may begin." What happens in these next few moments literally dictates the fate of your entire paper. Just look at the panicked approach versus the strategic approach here. The panicked student violently flips the page and starts scribbling the very second the clock starts. They inevitably hit a wall on a super hard question, go into a panic spiral where their confidence totally shatters, they freeze up, and they waste precious minutes crossing out and frantically rewriting answers. The strategic student, on the other hand, behaves completely differently. They use those first few minutes purely for planning. By mapping the paper out and securing the easy marks first, they actually end up saving 10 to 15 minutes of pure confusion later. You absolutely have to force yourself to be that strategic student.
So how do you actually do that when your heart is pounding and the adrenaline is rushing? Well, here are your actionable steps for those crucial first 5 minutes. Step 1. Read the instructions carefully and just scan through the whole paper. Step 2. Identify the high-mark questions and circle any compulsory ones. Actually, spotting that terrifying 12-mark essay early on is a great thing. It means your subconscious brain can start chewing on the arguments while you're busy knocking out the easy multiple-choice questions at the front. And Step 3. Mentally allocate your time. Anchor all that nervous anxiety into these concrete steps. Treat this as your strategy time, not your writing time.
Which brings us to part 4, the 2-pass method. Let's talk mid-exam execution.
Once those 5 minutes of planning are up, you enter the execution phase. And to pull this off effectively, you need a system, specifically the 2-pass method. This is a brilliant strategy where you spend roughly 70% of your total exam time on a first pass, meaning you flip through the paper, answering absolutely every question you find easy or can do quickly. You intentionally skip anything that stumps you. Then, you use the remaining 30% of your time for your second pass, going back to tackle those difficult skipped questions. The psychological boost you get from this is massive. Securing half the paper's marks in the first 30 minutes literally lowers your heart rate, clears the fog in your head, and completely removes the fear of failing. That means you can tackle those really hard problems with a calm, clear mind.
And the best part? By moving swiftly through that first pass, you are actively doing something called time banking. Time banking is exactly what it sounds like, answering easier questions quickly to build up a reserve of time. Let's look at a quick example. Imagine you hit a 3-mark definition question. You know it instantly, right? You write it down in exactly 30 seconds. Because of our 1 mark per minute rule, you just banked 2.5 minutes of free time. You save up that precious time currency to spend later on those inevitable, brutal multi-step math or science problems at the very end of the paper.
Okay, part 5, subject-specific pacing rules. Because yes, you have to adapt your strategy.
So, while the 1 minute per mark rule is an awesome baseline, you just can't use a one-size-fits-all approach for everything. Your tactics have to shift depending on what subject you're sitting for. For math and science, your pace is roughly 1 to 2 minutes per mark. Crucially, you must show you're working out to grab those method marks, but the second you get stuck on a calculation, you move on. Don't sit there agonizing over it. For English and humanities, your pacing shifts heavily toward essay structuring. You've got to budget 5 to 10 minutes purely for planning out your thoughts before you even uncap your pen to write. And then, oh boy, there's the infamous physics paper too, the multiple choice paper. You have 45 minutes for 40 questions. You need aggressive elimination here. Burning 4 minutes trying to perfectly calculate a single multiple choice question is a total trap. Setting a hard limit of 90 seconds per question and forcing yourself to just guess and move on if you're stumped is a legitimate, high-level exam skill you need to practice.
Now, when it comes to those beastly long answer and essay questions across any subject, micro-planning is going to be your absolute best friend. Spend just 60 to 90 seconds sketching out an outline of your key points before you start writing. Remember, the examiners are scanning your paper for very specific keywords on a grading rubric. They aren't reading your work for entertainment on a Sunday afternoon. You are writing to the mark scheme, not trying to win a Pulitzer Prize for literature. Stick strictly to the command words. If the question simply says state, give a short, direct answer. If it says analyze, then you provide the deep reasoning. A quick 60-second bulleted outline is going to save you 10 minutes of rambling, wandering thoughts that earn you absolutely 0 marks.
Finally, part 6, when time runs out. Welcome to the crisis and review phase.
So what happens when things go completely wrong? You've got 2 minutes left on the clock and you are running out of time fast. First up, you need to deploy rapid-fire triage tactics. Switch to bullet points immediately. Yes, even in subjects like English, business, or history. If time is basically up, dropping your flowing, full sentences to just list out the core historical facts or arguments will still salvage precious points from the examiner. Forget the beautiful introductory sentences. Just get the raw, unedited facts onto the page as fast as you can.
Second rule of crisis mode, never, ever leave a question blank. This just comes down to pure, simple logic. A blank space guarantees you 0 marks, no exceptions. But an incomplete, messy, bulleted answer, that might actually snag you 1 or 2 marks. A completely random guessed bubble on a multiple choice sheet, that still gives you a solid 25% chance of being right. Seriously, never leave free money on the table when the clock is winding down.
Third, and this is especially true in STEM subjects, if you simply cannot solve the whole problem, at least write down the governing equation. If a physics problem is asking you to find force, and you have absolutely no idea how to solve the crazy scenario they've given you, literally just write down F equals ma, and quickly jot down the numbers they gave you in the prompt. Simply substituting what you already know into the standard formula very often secures you 1 out of 3 marks, even if you never even get close to the final answer.
But listen, ideally, you are never even hitting that panic-inducing crisis mode. A perfectly executed exam breakdown looks a bit like this. 85% of your exam time is spent actively answering, leaving that 15% buffer we talked about earlier completely untouched. You use that bank time purely to review, and this phase is absolutely critical. This is where you catch that your calculator was accidentally set to degrees instead of radians. You double-check your decimal places, you verify your significant figures, and you make sure you didn't forget to write down your units. Uncovering those hidden marks in your own careless, rushed errors during this review phase can genuinely push your final score up an entire grade boundary.
Which brings us to our final big thought for today. Are you letting the clock control you, or are you controlling the clock? Because here's the secret. Time management isn't some rare genetic trait that top students are just magically born with. It is a highly mechanical, completely predictable skill. And like any skill, you have to train it. Start setting a stopwatch when you do past papers at home. Practice those first 5 minutes of planning until it's second nature. Force yourself to actually use the two-pass method. Take charge of your time right now in your practice sessions so that when exam day finally arrives, you walk in feeling confident, strategic, and completely in control of your success.